If you're listening to this, you've probably found yourself staring at a raw block explorer at some point, just trying to figure out why a specific transaction failed, or maybe where a smart contract actually routed your funds.
Oh, yeah, constantly.
Right. And unless you literally have a compiler running in your head, you're just looking at this massive wall of raw call data. It's just endless strings of hexadecimals. I mean, the data is all right there. It's perfectly public, but functionally, it's completely impenetrable, like the digital equivalent of alphabet soup.
Yeah, it really is. And, it's sort of the ultimate irony of Web3, right?
Right.
We spent all this time building the most transparent financial system in human history.
Right.
Every single transaction is recorded.
Exactly.
But actually deriving like a usable insight from it in real time, that requires a massive, incredibly sophisticated infrastructure just to translate the machine state into human reality.
Which is exactly the challenge we're unpacking in today's deep dive. We are taking a close look at a platform called Sentio. So to do this, we're pulling from a stack of sources. We've got their official light paper, some really deep developer blog updates, and also live market data straight from CoinMarketCap.
Right, because the token side is wild right now.
Oh, it really is.
Yeah.
But the main mission here is to figure out how Sentio is structuring this wild west of on-chain data. Because they aren't just indexing it, they are using this heavily AI-driven infrastructure to try and make that data transparent, verifiable, and instantly actionable for developers.
Yeah, and the scale of what they're attempting is, it's really what makes it so interesting to me. Because we aren't just talking about a simple query tool here.
Yeah, not at all.
Sentio is a decentralized data and compute network. In their own words, they define themselves as a developer-first, AI-powered modular Web3 data infrastructure.
Okay, let's ground that in reality for a second, because that's a lot of buzzwords. We always hear the analogy that a blockchain is like a massive public library. But I'd argue it's actually worse than that. It's like a library where the books are constantly rewriting themselves, like every 12 seconds, there's zero card catalog. And oh yeah, every single page is written in bytecode.
That's a painfully accurate analogy.
Yeah. So Sentio is basically stepping in to act as the ultimate AI-powered head librarian. They aren't just cataloging the books, they're instantly reading them, translating the bytecode, and telling you the exact plot points you actually care about.
And if you look at the numbers from their documentation, developers are heavily relying on this head librarian. Like Sentio currently has over 3,000 active users. They are processing 300 queries per second consistently.
Wow.
Yeah. They have handled a staggering 6 billion discrete on-chain events. Plus, they run about 35,000 simulations.
But the metric that really caught my eye in their light paper, the one that really stood out, is the TVS, or total value served. $24 billion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Total value served is a fascinating metric for an infrastructure project. It basically means that Sentio's data layer is currently being used to power the growth and the observability of DeFi protocols that hold a combined $24 billion in locked value.
That's a lot of liquidity relying on one data layer.
Exactly. When an ecosystem is securing that kind of money, a delayed data feed or some undetected smart contract bug isn't just a degraded user experience, right? It's a critical systemic vulnerability.
I do have to push back on the core premise here, though. I mean, we already have massive indexing protocols in this space.
Sure.
We have the graph, we have all these specialized RPC providers. So if the ledger is literally designed to be public and transparent by default, and developers can already build subgraphs to index that data, why does the industry even need Sentio? Why build an entirely separate, decentralized network specifically for compute? What's the actual gap they're filling?
Well, that right there is the critical distinction. You really have to separate static indexing from dynamic computation.
Okay, explain that.
So it's true. If you just want to know, say, the historical token balance of a specific wallet address, an existing indexer or just a standard RPC node works totally fine. But raw data availability does not give you derived complex states.
Give me an example of a derived state. Like, what does that look like in practice?
Okay, let's say you are building a decentralized exchange analytics dashboard, and you want to show your users the real-time impermanent loss of a specific liquidity pool over the last 24 hours. But, and here's the kicker, you want to adjust it for MEV extraction.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, a standard indexer can't just hand you that number, because that number simply doesn't exist on the blockchain. The blockchain only contains the raw swap transactions.
Right, it just says wallet A swapped X for Y.
Exactly. So to get that actual impermanent loss figure, your application have to pull thousands of transactions,
Yeah.
filter out all the failed ones, parse the complex internal logic of the DX contract, cross-reference the price oracle data at the exact millisecond of every single swap, and then compute all the math.
So basically, if you rely on a standard indexer, your own app has to do all that heavy lifting on the client side, which I imagine is incredibly slow and expensive.
Precisely. It's a nightmare for performance. So Sentio moves all that heavy lifting into their modular compute network. They aggregate the puzzle pieces, compute the mathematical picture, and just deliver the final clean result to the developer.
And they're doing this across a really fragmented landscape right now. I noticed Sentio is fundamentally chain agnostic.
Very much so.
Yeah, their documentation shows support for EVM chains, Aptos, Sui, IOTS, Solana, and Fuel. From a dev perspective, if you're building an omnichain protocol, say a money market that operates on both Ethereum and Solana, you usually have to write completely different data pipelines.
Oh, completely. The architectures of an EVM chain and Solana are fundamentally opposed.
Right, but Sentio basically gives you one unified toolkit to query both.
And that cross-chain functionality is just an absolute necessity at this point in the market cycle. Liquidity is so fragmented, so developers use tools like Sentio processors to collect this multi-chain data and then output it via webhooks, real-time dashboards, or, and this is a big one, what they call materialized views.
Yeah, materialized views. That's a concept that gets thrown around a lot in traditional database architecture. In the context of Web3, as I understand it, it basically functions as a dynamically updating cache for those complex queries we were just talking about.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Because if your application needs to display that complicated impermanent loss calculation, asking the database to run that math from scratch every single time a new user opens your app it would bottleneck the system immediately.
Exactly. A materialized view solves that by saving the result of the query.
Hmm.
Then, as new blocks are finalized on the chain, Sentio just incrementally updates that specific saved result in the background. So when a user opens the app, the data loads instantly because it's already pre-computed.
Which is fantastic for performance. But honestly, what stood out to me even more in their dev documentation is their security and testing suite. They have this feature called the Sentio debugger.
Oh, the debugger is incredible.
Yeah. It includes fund tracing, trace and call features, simulation modes with actual upload compilation, and this really unique single-step mode.
The single-step mode fundamentally changes how developers do post-mortem analysis or even pre-deployment testing. Think about trying to figure out how a complex DeFi protocol was exploited. Normally, a standard block explorer just shows you that a transaction occurred, and then boom, the protocol's vault was suddenly empty.
It's like arriving at a bank vault after a heist. You know the money is gone, but you have no idea how they actually bypassed the alarm system.
That's a great way to put it. Single-step debugging gives you the security camera footage and lets you scrub through it frame by single frame.
Frame-by-frame forensics.
Right, because a single smart contract interaction might trigger a cascade of like 20 different internal function calls across multiple nested protocols, all in a fraction of a second.
Yeah.
Single-step mode allows the developer to walk through that execution, opcode by opcode, state by state, to pinpoint the exact line of logic where the vulnerability was exploited.
And they let developers run these simulations on-chain before actually deploying the code live, right? Just running dry tests against the current mainnet state.
Yep.
But we really have to talk about how their toolset goes beyond just traditional debugging. Because their reliance on artificial intelligence is deeply integrated into everything they do. They highlight AI chat, AI SQL generation, AI processor generation, and AI diagnostics.
The AI SQL generation is particularly powerful, especially for analysts who, they understand the market perfectly, but they might not be deep database engineers.
Right, they aren't SQL experts.
Exactly. You can literally use natural language prompts. You just type, show me all the wallet addresses that supplied USDC to Aave right before the latest interest rate spike. And the AI translates that plain English into the incredibly complex, multi-layered SQL join query required to pull that specific cross-section of blockchain data.
You really see the real-world application of this power in their developer blogs, specifically when they talk about tracking eigenlayer points.
Oh, yeah. Eigenlayer.
Because Eigenlayer introduced restaking, which is, it's incredibly complex under the hood. Users deposit liquid staking tokens, which then secure other networks, and in return, they earn these dynamic, continuously compounding points.
And tracking those points is just an absolute mathematical nightmare for a developer trying to build a user interface.
I can imagine.
Because the user might have deposited into EigenLayer through a liquid restaking protocol like, say, Renzo. And then they took that derivative token and put it into a yield stripping protocol like Pendle.
So the underlying point value is constantly compounding, the assets are physically moving around, and the state is continuously shifting across multiple different smart contracts.
Exactly. Trying to write the boilerplate code to track all those moving parts across Renzo, Pendle, and EigenLayer manually, that would take a dev team weeks. But Sentio's AI processor generation essentially just writes the indexing scripts for the developer. You define the smart contracts you want to monitor, and the AI generates the TypeScript code to track the point allocations dynamically.
And we also see them applying this to MEV, right?
Yeah.
Maximal extractable value.
Yeah, MEV is huge here.
It's essentially that invisible tax that sophisticated trading bots extract from everyday users. You know, tactics like sandwich attacks or front-running. Sentio's infrastructure allows developers to analyze the mempool and map out exactly how these invisible MEV strategies are operating.
And they've actually recently partnered with the Oracle network Pith to pull in high-fidelity, sub-second price data, which makes these MEV analytics even more precise.
Okay, but here is my friction point with all this heavy AI integration. I mean, if Sentio has AI SQL generation and AI processor generation automatically writing the code to query these highly complex state changes, doesn't that create a severe over-reliance on a black box? Like, think about it. If a developer uses Sentio's AI to generate the logic that tracks millions of dollars in user points on EigenLayer, and they don't fundamentally understand the SQL or TypeScript the AI just wrote, aren't we introducing a massive new vector for systemic risk? Is this actually empowering developers or just making them dangerously dependent?
It's a fair question. It is the classic double-edged sword of abstraction.
Right.
Every single time we introduce a layer that abstracts complexity, we distance the operator from the bare metal mechanics.
Exactly.
We saw this decades ago when software development moved from, manual memory management and assembly to high-level languages like C or Python. And the risk you're identifying is very real. If the AI hallucinates a logic flaw in how it tracks an MEV strategy, and the developer just blindly deploys it, the resulting data feed is corrupted.
Which goes back to that $24 billion in total value served. A corrupted data feed in DeFi isn't just a UI glitch. It leads to mispriced assets or, worse, unfairly liquidated users.
Yeah.
It does. It absolutely does.
Yeah.
However, the AI in Sentio's stack isn't really designed to replace the architectural vision of the developer. It is designed to eliminate the friction of data retrieval.
Right.
The developer still dictates the parameters. They still have to verify the output using tools like the single-step debugger we talked about. The AI is basically building the scaffolding so the developer can focus on the core logic of the application rather than spending, 80% of their time just trying to parse the blockchain's alphabet soup.
And that ability to compress weeks of data pipeline engineering into just a few hours of AI-assisted queries, that isn't just a technical win. It's a massive economic moat.
Oh, absolutely.
And you can see that realization reflected exactly in who is funding this infrastructure. Let's pivot to the business side of Sentio because the market data is honestly fascinating. Sentio XYZ Inc. raised $6.4 million, and that round was led by Lightspeed Venture Partners.
Yeah, and having Lightspeed lead the round is a very strong signal in this space. You also have backing from Hashkey Capital, Canonical Crypto, and Essence VC.
Heavy hitters.
Definitely. These are institutions that focus heavily on the picks and shovels of the Web3 ecosystem. They are betting on the fundamental infrastructure layer.
And all of this utility and venture backing is intrinsically tied to the Sentio network's native asset, the ST token.
The ST token. Yeah, this is where it gets crazy.
It really does. Looking at the Livecoin market cap data for today, which is April 23, 2026, the ST token is a masterclass in low-float crypto market dynamics. As of right now, it's trading around 0.068 cent. It is up just under 3% on the day. But the weekly chart, absolute whiplash.
The volatility is extreme, even for crypto. The all-time high for ST was set just 8 days ago at roughly 21 cents, 0.2171 applying to be exact.
Wow.
This means the token is currently down over 68% from a peak it hit barely over a week ago.
Wow.
But on the flip side, it also hit its all-time low just 6 days ago at roughly 5 cents, which means it has already bounced almost 30% from that floor.
A 68% crash, followed by a 30% rally inside of a single week. To understand why an infrastructure token with serious VC backing trades like a volatile meme coin, You really have to look closely at the tokenomics because the ST token structure is heavily, heavily locked up.
Right.
The total and maximum supply is strictly capped at 1 billion tokens. But the circulating supply, the tokens that are actually liquid and trading on exchanges right now is only 56 million.
Which is exactly 5.6% of the total supply. The vast, vast majority of the network's equity is still vesting. It's held by the team, the treasury, or those early venture capital backers.
And this creates a massive divergence in how the market values the project. Let me use an analogy here. It's like looking at an iceberg where 94% of the mass is still underwater and completely locked up.
That's exactly what it is.
The current market cap, based only on those 56 million circulating tokens, is a very modest $3.82 million. But the fully diluted value, the FDV, which prices the project as if all 1 billion tokens were circulating today, sits at an incredible $68.35 million.
And that gap, that massive gulf between the 3.8 million circulating market cap and the 68 million fully diluted value is the primary engine of the volatility you are seeing.
So how does that tiny float actually trigger the wild swings? Because you look at the 24-hour trading volume and it's $9.4 million. If the circulating market cap is only $3.8 million, that means we are looking at a volume to market cap ratio of over 245%.
It's insane.
The entire available supply of this token is changing hands nearly 2.5 times every single day.
Right, and when a token has a float of only 5.6%, you're dealing with an incredibly illiquid order book relative to the project's actual mind share in the market. So any catalyst, say, Sentio announces that Pith partnership, where they expand support to a new chain like Civi, it creates massive influx of buying pressure.
Because people want in on the news.
Exactly. But because 94% of the tokens are locked, all those new buyers are fighting over a microscopic pool of liquid tokens.
So they hit a massive supply wall. Sellers realize there is barely any liquidity, so they pull their ask prices way higher, and the token just violently squeezes upward, which perfectly explains that spike to 21 cents 8 days ago.
Yep. But the downside is just as aggressive. Because sophisticated market participants, they look at that $68 million fully diluted value, and they understand the tokenomics schedule. They know that eventually those locked tokens will begin to vest and hit the open market.
Right, the underwater part of the iceberg starts surfacing.
Exactly. And if the underlying demand for the Sentio network doesn't grow fast enough to absorb all that incoming supply inflation, the price corrects sharply to find a new equilibrium.
It's a hyper-speculative environment. And honestly, that's reinforced by where this trading is actually happening.
Right.
Because out of that massive $9.4 million in daily volume, 72.5% of it is completely isolated to PancakeSwap.
Right.
Even though this is a deep infrastructure play, the vast majority of the price discovery is happening on a decentralized exchange favored by retail traders. It's not being dominated by centralized platforms like Binance or Kraken, even though it has listings there.
It really highlights a core duality in the current Web3 landscape, doesn't it?
It really does.
On one hand, you have Sentio engineering this deeply technical, highly rational AI debugging infrastructure. It's designed to help institutional developers track eigenlayer yields and map out MEV vectors.
Very serious stuff.
Right. But on the other hand, the absolute chaotic, high-velocity speculation of decentralized finance. You have almost 20,000 individual holders riding this low-float volatility wave.
Proving once again that in crypto, the technology and the token rarely move at the same speed.
Very true.
So let's pull all these threads together. We started with the premise that raw blockchain data is functionally unreadable without a sophisticated interpreter.
The alphabet soup.
Exactly, and Sentio has positioned itself not just as an indexer, but as a modular compute network. They are backed by major venture capital, utilizing this really advanced AI generation and frame-by-frame debugging to turn 6 billion raw network events into instant, actionable intelligence across multiple chains.
Right.
And they are doing it all against the backdrop of a highly volatile, low-float native token, ST.
I think the fundamental takeaway for anyone operating in this space, whether you're a builder or an investor, is that observability is the hidden engine of decentralized finance.
100%.
If you are a developer, tools like materialized views and single-step debuggers are quite literally the difference between a successful protocol launch and a devastating multi-million-dollar exploit. And if you're an enthusiast or an analyst, infrastructure like Sentio is what actually allows you to monitor where the smart money is flowing or how MEV bots are extracting value from retail trades. You simply cannot navigate a market if you cannot accurately see the state of the board.
Which brings up a final, rather paradoxical thought I want to leave you with. Sentio's entire mission, aided by AI, is to bring perfect observability to the blockchain.
Right.
They want to make it so complex, strategies, hidden yields, and contract logic can be instantly synthesized and understood by anyone just typing a natural language prompt. But if tools like Sentio eventually make every single on-chain action perfectly transparent and instantly legible via AI, what happens to the concept of a competitive edge in crypto?
That's a great question, because in traditional markets, alpha is almost entirely derived from information asymmetry.
Mhm.
You win because you know something or you can calculate something faster than the person on the other side of the trade.
Exactly. So if perfect AI-driven observability eliminates that asymmetry, does it actually level the playing field? Does it allow the everyday retail user to finally see the matrix just as clearly as the market makers?
Or does it do the exact opposite?
Right. Does perfect data availability simply hand the ultimate advantage to the massive institutions who have the capital to run the fastest, most complex AI queries on the network, effectively front-running everyone else's understanding of the market?
It's a bit scary to think about. When the raw data finally makes perfect sense, who actually captures the value?
Definitely something to consider the next time you find yourself staring at a block explorer.